talk to you a little bit about, for the next few minutes, about the speaking and listening class that happens at Classic English on Saturday mornings. So, have you ever listened to English speakers in movies or conversations and you wonder why I hear "how's it?" And then you see the subtitle or you see the words and it says "how is it?" Or when you're thinking you said "kiss," but the person who's listening to you looks at you and passes you keys. So these are just two little examples of some of the problems that you may run into because you're not used to speaking English or you were taught incorrectly in terms of how to pronounce certain words, or that what certain words you think is supposed to sound like, but it's actually not the case. And so the purpose of this morning class over 16 weeks is to address some of these issues, which will also help you improve your speaking and listening skills. So in that case, what do we actually do in these morning classes? We always start off the class with a daily live conversation style theme, so that you can have the time to brainstorm and think about things that you might want to talk about, or that you know in Chinese but don't know how to express in English. So we'll always take some time to talk about, for example, maybe public holidays like Christmas or Easter, which many students may not be familiar with Easter, but you should know if you're going to, for example, UK or Australia because they celebrate that holiday. Or we can talk about the weather or food and ask you to brainstorm a little bit about what kind of words or phrases that you know, and then I will give you some time to think and then prepare and then talk to your fellow students to have a little bit of a conversation style speech. After that, in the next hour or so of the class, we will spend usually on one or two things related to pronunciation. For example, in terms of basic vowels or consonant sounds, and this happens in the first 8 weeks of the course, or in the back half, the second 8 classes, the second 8 weeks, we will maybe talk about more advanced issues like your intonation, your inflection, stress points, which makes things sound slightly different, and these are tricky things for people to get used to, which you need to do. And this is why I would recommend taking all 16 classes instead of just the 8 class, because we practice very different things in the first 8 weeks versus the second 8 weeks of the course. So for example, in the second 8 weeks, we will maybe look at linking sounds. So for example, you might read "what did you do?" and then you hear "what you do." Or other things like, for example, why does this word sound like delegate in certain situations, but in other situations, exactly the same word, we hear delegate. And so these both are correct, but they're slightly different given the circumstances and the context they're used in. Again, for this part, there will be some time for you to practice, to get used to the sound from out of your mouth in terms of the consonant sound or the vowel sound or the smoothness of your sentences, so that you can get used to it. Then we will move on to the listening section of the class, where I'll always play a IELTS listening question, usually the longer academic-based question, and then as well as a TOEFL lecture question. Then I'll usually play this twice, and we will then look through the script, which I'll give you, so we can look at where the answers to the questions are, and also look through the content themselves, because you might find there's a lot of new words or new phrases or idioms that may affect your understanding. So we will spend time talking through both lecture questions, not just the question themselves, but also the content of these questions. In the last bits of the class, usually about the last 30 minutes, we will swing back to speaking again. For example, we may talk about some grammar, like clauses or tenses, or we will discuss a little bit more about maybe linking sound rules and so forth. And then we will again do some practice based on either IELTS or TOEFL speaking questions. Usually here we focus just on the opinion-based questions for both IELTS and TOEFL because this is usually the trickiest for a lot of students. Asian students, Taiwanese students are not used to expressing themselves, expressing their own opinions, especially when you have to speak in English. So that's why most of the practice questions here is opinion-based. I want to hear what you have to say on a certain topic. I usually also would give you a bit of speaking homework, so maybe there's an extra question or two that you haven't done, so I'll ask you to go home and think about it. Record yourself using a cell phone, and you can email it back to me so I can give you feedback if you wish. So, a quick summary. The purpose of the first part of the course, the first A class, is to make sure that you understand why each alphabet sounds the way they do and what you need to be careful of in terms of not messing sounds up. While the second half is more focused on the advanced skills to make you sound more fluent and less robotic. And through all 16 classes, the listening section, so the middle part, it will always be very different topics. We might jump back to a biology, for example, because it's very popular, but a lot of the time it's very different topics throughout every week. And this will give you exposure to different vocabulary, different fields, and maximize your understanding for the different disciplines and help you when you come to take TOEFL or IELTS tests. And even if you are not planning to take either of these tests, I would still recommend coming to listen and practice in this course because a good portion of the material that we practice and learn is effective outside TOEFL and IELTS. For example, your pronunciation, the type of speaking, the daily conversation that you have. So even though we do use TOEFL and IELTS materials, just remember the skills that you learn, the vocabulary that you learn, the phrases and things like that could be useful outside test environments. And so I hope to see you there in the morning class for listening and speaking.